Hey everybody, Josh Seartson, a World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by G. Edward Griffin, of course, the famous author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, which you can see in person. Jekyll Island, that is, on October 10th and 11th, Jekyll Island, Georgia, for the Red Pill Expo 2020. Yes, that is still going on, and we're going to talk about that later. But first, Ed, I mean, this last year, I don't know how to put it into words. I'm lost for a description. I was wondering if you could describe 2020 so far. How would you describe it?
Well, that silence is forcing me to think here. How would I describe 2020 in a way that people don't already know what I'm going to say? Because it's obvious what it is. It's chaos. I guess that's the crisis and chaos. But I would add to that it's not the crisis and chaos that people think. And by that, I mean, it's primarily theater. Yes, every time, I mean, if you live inside your house and you're locked down and you can't get out, and it's like listening to the news report on the radio or the TV. If you open your window, you might see that it's entirely different than what they're saying it is. If you depend on your news and your information completely on that little rectangular thing in your living room or in your office, you get a distorted view of what's going on in the world. So if that's your view, it's crisis and chaos, and everybody's going crazy. There's violence. Everybody's dying of COVID. There's fear and illness and tragedy and violence and racism and environmental destruction and, on and on. Everything is enough to scare you to death. And so most people just say, what do you think about 2020? They'll say, man, this is the worst year I've ever seen, or something like that. I'm not going to change that appraisal either, but my reason for saying it's the worst year I've seen is because so many of the predictions that those of us that have been in the trenches for a long time, and we've made some predictions, some very dire predictions starting way back in the 1960s. And the depressing part is that our predictions have come true and they are unfolding right now. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not theater, but that was part of the prediction, that there would be a lot of theater out there. And the whole thing is to frighten people to death. Let's get to maybe the main point of all of this, is that everything we see in this crisis and catastrophe is being manipulated or engineered. It's not real. I mean, it's real enough. You can create race hatred and race violence by sending platoons of combatants into the neighborhoods of the opposite racial community and start shooting their kids, and our enemies talk about the necessity of doing that. So if white people go into the black neighborhoods and shoot little black kids, the black people are going to be outraged and come plunging into the white neighborhoods and they shoot white kids, and that doesn't take very much of that before there's real race war going on. So that part is real, but what they don't realize is it's engineered. Now, famine can be very, very real, I think, at the end of this year coming up, and certainly next year. And because why? Well, is it real? We have too many people in the world. We can't feed them all. Well, not really. It's not that at all. It's because the channels of transportation are broken. It's because the farmers are required to bury their crops and kill their livestock because they can't get them to market. Because rules and regulations have made it impossible for people to grow food in their own backyard. It's because warehouses all around the country, the huge stockpiles are burning down all of a sudden, all at the same time, very mysterious fires. It's because a lot of these things, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is a pattern. And why would anybody create all this chaos? That's the point. Why would they do that if in fact my theory is correct? Well, they would do it if they wanted people totally in fear and turning to them to be taken care of, to be protected. If they were a megalomaniac and they wanted to rule the world, let's put it bluntly, or if there was a group of them that wanted to rule the world for the world's own good, you understand, then how do you convince people to give up their liberties? Pretty easy. Just put them into a state of fear, a state of panic, a state of hunger, fear of disease, fear of violence, fear of terrorism, fear of somebody coming to this house and burning your house down. Fear. So finally, when the authorities say, okay, I guess that they're ready for our proposal now, they say, you folks need martial law, and they'll say, yes, we've been waiting for it. We've been calling for martial law. Please send it. And then they say, okay, we got them now. That's what we wanted. They are asking for it. So in a nutshell, that's how I see 2020 is coming to the fruition of this long range plan, which I've just touched on. It's no surprise to the old timers like me because we've been watching it unfold. We've been reading their textbooks. We know some of the people that have broken out of that camp, and they've talked very frankly about these plans. So it's no surprise, but it's very, very discouraging to see it unfolding. And the most discouraging part is that most of the people who are victims of this have no idea that it's engineered. They think it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always under the guise of the greater good of the greater number. That's how they deliver all this stuff to us. And they manipulate our fears that are unfounded, obviously, but manipulate our fears in order to gather more control over the masses, to divide the masses against each other so they fight themselves instead of the real enemies. And you've been talking about this for a long time. And more specifically, you were talking even as soon as January of this year. I remember getting your emails from your newsletter where you were talking about how this was based on a hoax. And you called it right from the beginning, while a lot of people, including myself, I knew that they were going to use it for some false flag of some kind. But even myself, initially, when I first looked at it, I said, these numbers look a little bit concerning. Obviously, they did what they did with HIV back in the 80s. But with that said, Ed, I have to ask, I mean, let's start off let's make this clear to viewers that aren't yet aware, that are thinking everything being said is preposterous. Keep in mind that Dr. Fauci is the head of the Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which got millions of dollars in a grant from the U.S. government over 5 or 4 years to study coronavirus in bats in Wuhan, China, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, 96% similar to the novel coronavirus. And the whole purpose of the study was to spread it to humans. Now, we have that, and then you have the initial fears that are being spread in the media back in January and February, and then we find out later that it's all based on a lie. Asymptomatic cases don't spread easily. It's almost impossible, actually, 1 in 10,000, something like that. And then at the same time, it doesn't spread on surfaces, so that gets rid of the whole notion of destroying your immune system with antibacterial wash, which isn't antiviral. And then you find out all these different studies on masks over the years that show they don't work. And I mean, the studies are piling up, the science piles up, but we don't listen to the science. We listen to a Swedish little girl named Greta Thunberg, or we listen to a computer geek from the 70s named Bill Gates, who has a huge agenda. So I have to ask, because we are talking right now on September 11th of 2020, the 19th anniversary of one of the greatest false flags in recent history, is this kind of going to surpass 9/11 as the greatest false flag in history, and why?
Well, you picked my brain on that one, because I've been thinking about that all day. I used to say 9/11 was the greatest deception of history, but now I have to say it's the second greatest. Mm-hmm. The coronavirus pandemic is no doubt the greatest because it involves not just one country, it involves all countries, not just one group of people, but everybody on the planet, as we can see. And while the 9/11 theater was to create fear, as I said earlier, as part of that pattern, so that we would willingly give up our liberties, and such things as Patriot Acts and things like that were presented to us as being good, so we can be protected against this thing. So we say, yeah, we want that, some more of it, please. So not only because of that, but this is across the board. I mean, if they took those rules away, if the Patriot Act was scissored up tomorrow, and we could be restored to normal activity again, probably in a very short period of time, maybe a few days for all I know. I mean, it's just could be almost instant. But the damage being done to the world economy, and certainly to the economies of the Western world and the advanced nations, may never be undone. Well, it's never is a big word, but it might take decades, or even a century or more, to undo the damage that is being done right as we speak. So the magnitude of the effect makes this theater, I think, the biggest fraud of anything that history has ever seen.
And you get this, it's really strange. It is really out of the Twilight Zone. I've actually seen Twilight Zone episodes that are way more sane than what we're dealing with right now. And I mean, it's just like walking into a nightmare every day. I'm trying to be positive, but it's a nightmare this year. And, you know, when they actually, suddenly the left supports shutting down all the borders and not allowing people to move from point A to point B at all. And you're not allowed to travel anywhere. You're going to be forced medicated, all this stuff. But one thing that really gets me is the confidence that so many people have after watching television that we are somehow evil for calling this stuff out, and they're completely in the right. For example, if I walk into a convenience store without a mask on, and it's just something so futile and so ridiculous, I'll have 14 or 15-year-old girls giving me dirty looks like I'm an idiot. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure I've done more research than them. I mean, how have you been dealing with the impact of this just in your own personal life? Because obviously they are physically forcing people throughout California to wear a mask going into many stores. I don't know what it's like in your area because you are more rural, but how have you been dealing with that, and what's been kind of the backlash? Have people been forcing you to wear a mask? What's going on there?
It's a varied story depending on where you go. I think that's true of everywhere. California, of course, is a hotbed of idiocy, and so you don't expect much different than that here. There are areas, more rural areas, where people seem to watch television less, or I don't know what the thing is, but anyway, there are places like San Luis Obispo County, or the northern San Luis Obispo County, where people are pretty much normal. I mean, they laugh at all this nonsense. But you go 30 miles south, and it's now you're in university zone. You know, there's a big college there, and everybody's under that influence. And oh yeah, we got to wear the mask and 6 feet apart. So they know nothing except what they've been told, and it comes from authority. And so that's the one thing that our school systems are really good at, and that's teaching children to be respectful and obedient to authority. You know, it's a big thing. It's not so much what you learn that's important. It's learning how to be a team player, you know, how to be a good citizen and, you know, be part of the group, the collective. Mm-hmm. And so they're good at that. And they come out of there. And my golly, if we see television coming out of the press room in the White House with the president standing looking bewildered next to some guy that's yabbity. They don't know what he's saying, except that you got to wear a mask. And otherwise, millions and millions of innocent people are going to die. That's the message they get. And that's all they need to know, is that it came from authority, so it must be true. Mm-hmm. So having said that, and everybody, I think, gets a whiff of that now and then, my decision on that, and I'm not recommending this to anybody, it just happens to be my decision, that I believe it's important to pick my battlegrounds. And I could, let me back up a little bit. This is the same line of thinking I had to go through when I had to decide what's my public stance on not paying income tax, because I know I believe it's unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. I think it's illegal also. I also think it's stupid. And I think it's counterproductive. I think it's immoral. All these things. So yet I pay my income tax. Why don't I just go along with the tax protesters and say, I'm not going to pay it because it's all for all the reasons I mentioned. And the reason I decided to go along with the tax fraud is because I knew from what I could see from those who did take that route, that once I took that step, that's all I would be able to do for the rest of my life, is to defend myself and promote the ideas. And I'd be in court probably most of the time. And not that I'd be afraid of that. It's just that's the choice I would make. It's not what I take a stand. The choice is, what am I going to do for the rest of my life in fighting this tyranny? Am I going to fight it in the courtroom, or do I want to fight it in the court of public opinion? Do I want to be free to be able to produce programs and talk to people and organize and develop committees and to build a movement to put an end to the income tax? Or will I just fight it on a one-man basis, you say? So I thought about it. I said, well, there's a similar challenge here. How am I going to spend my time? Do I want to turn all those little girls that you talked about into my enemies, that they see, oh, there's the guy, hate him, he's stupid, just because of that? Or do I just play along and say, yeah, dear, how's it going today? How's your dad? You know, maintain a relationship so that when later we talk about this, I can give them a pamphlet or have a conversation with them, and they don't think of me with a knee-jerk reaction of being, oh, he's one of those tin hat people.
I do appreciate your vigilance in having conversations with people. I don't know how you still do it after all these years, because most likely if you went up to that young girl, she'd probably call you a fascist and scream at you for talking at her and spreading COVID or something.
Well, if I didn't have a mask on, that's true. Yeah. So I get to the point, when I go into those places, I do put a mask on, even though I know that there's a lot of merit to saying, this is it, this is my stand, you know? And I have to decide, if I do that, then I think that's going to be, from that point forward, I'm going to be Mr. Anti-Mask, and that's how everybody will think of me, and that's all that they'll want to talk to me about. And I got other things I would rather do that I think are probably more effective with my time than that. So it's a choice that I've made, because I do have other options to do with, to spend my 16 hours or 20 hours a day that I work, and so I don't want to be involved in that.
Right. Understood. And even Larkin Rose, who went to jail for not paying taxes, will say today, you know, well, my time's better spent talking about these things and educating people on these things rather than sitting in a prison cell for not paying taxes. You know, people do whatever they need to do in their life and pick their battles for sure. And I wanted to talk about something that has been on a lot of people's radar lately. This video you made many years ago, you did a very famous interview with Yuri Bezmenov, a Soviet KGB defector back in the 1980s, which, by the way, just made it into the latest Call of Duty video game. He warned about collectivism and the enslavement of mankind coming to the shores of the United States. He warned of how enslavement would be laid down in steps unto the American people.
To change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
It has all come alarmingly true. What would Yuri Bezmenov think of this global crackdown on the most basic freedoms today, in your opinion?
Well, I have a pretty good idea of what he would say, because he had a caustic way of dealing with people who don't listen. By that, I mean he had a very choice vocabulary for them.
Things we can't say on YouTube.
Things we can't say in polite public. But he would say something like, yes, you Americans are nothing but useful idiots. You've thrown away the most precious thing you've had so that you can go play your music and play your games and drink your soda pops, stuff like that. And he would be, unfortunately, brutally correct.
And I have to ask, because that interview has been gaining so much viewership lately. It has in the past too. It kind of goes in trends of a bunch of people suddenly watch this video. A lot of people connect with that video after all these years. What do you think of people's identifying with what Yuri said all those years ago, and why it stayed so true?
I thought about that. I don't really have a good opinion. I can think of some possibilities, but I haven't. The little ball going around the roulette wheel hasn't dropped into the slot yet, in my opinion. It could be several things. I guess old things usually have a certain fascination when you can say, well, this person speaking, saying these outlandish things, he did that 50 years ago, and they're not outlandish anymore. So there's a value to that, to see the validation of most of what this person said, and then it puts the yet realized part into a perspective of being realistic. When none of it has yet unfolded, you tend to say that'll never happen in America. I mean, yeah, over in Europe or Asia or Africa, yeah, well, those backward people are. But here in America, we got freedom here. That'll never happen here. Americans are too smart for that. All these things they used to say, and now they can say, well, my God, yeah, it's happening all right. Now maybe we should look at it a little more carefully. So the fact that it's old has a lot of value to it. You and I are now saying things of a similar nature about the future. And people are still in that mode of saying, well, that'll never happen here. I mean, yeah, we've slipped a lot, but we always come back. The recessions always rebound. Yeah, they're always tough times, but we're a resilient people, and we'll, all the things that people say to themselves to comfort themselves and justify not taking this warning seriously, mainly because they don't know what to do about it, first of all. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the typical American's attitude of what to do about it simply means, well, who are you going to vote for? That's where it stops, Most people think, oh yeah, my obligation of citizenship, the thing that I do to preserve my freedom, is to decide which political party I'm going to be in.
Yeah.
That's
and,
it.
After every election, the government gets a little bit bigger,
and
Nothing
then everyone
changes.
trusts
Nothing changes.
everything. They're
They
completely
never change.
dependent on some psychopath in a suit that says he can
Yeah.
rule everyone.
So they go from one party to the next, and we're going through the process right now. There's a big recoil against the left, so everybody's going to go to Mr. Trump and on the Republican Party this time. Yeah, I mean, victory. Every time, no matter who wins the election, it's a big victory, right? But as you just said, nothing changes, and I'm afraid as long as we're in the grips of the two-party system, nothing will change.
I mean, my goodness, have we seen a more socialistic time in our history? The Fed owns up, I think, 1/3 of all mortgages in the country right now. If everyone goes home, that's about 28 million people homeless. That's 9 out of 100 Americans homeless. Now, of course, the U.S. government won't allow that to happen, so the banks will seize the houses. Then the government will take over those houses, and then they'll do a relief program where they give everyone free houses. And then, whoopee, the government saved us from the problem it created in the first place. And it goes in circle forever, and it's very, very much exhausting. And I wanted to ask if this is what 2020 looks like, what do you think 2021 is going to look like, in your opinion? I mean, it doesn't seem like they're going to just relent all their power suddenly.
I wish you hadn't asked me that question, because what I see is likely to happen is not very pretty. And I hope I'm wrong, but you asked me what I think, and so I guess by prefacing it, as I just did, is saying I hope I'm wrong, and that this is not anything I want to see. But what I see is that the last few years have been carefully engineered to throw the conservative or the patriotic or the libertarian or the individualist vote, whatever you want to call it, to the Republican Party so it can be betrayed one more time. And this is time, in other words, Mr. Trump will be reelected. And in spite of, I don't know what his motives are, but he's no different than any other president. He's controlled. He was put into the White House by huge amounts of money and support. And I believe that the plan originally was to re-engineer the left, bring it out and make it as violent and as fearful as possible, as obnoxious, as horrible, as repulsive, as scary as it can be, to make sure that anybody with any sense and any dignity and any humanity would run the other way. And so then all of the support is going to be with the Republican Party when it's time to hit the major blow. There will probably be, I think what there will be is Mr. Trump will be elected. It'll be a great victory. And then, of course, the violence will really start. And it'll be so gruesome and terrible. And there really will be some genuine, little look like civil war. There will be blood in the streets. And people will be really scared. And then the president of the United States will say, well, we've got to put a stop to this. We're going to declare martial law. And everybody will say, thank you. Oh, that's what we want. And it will never go away.
Get in your house now! Let's go! Light him up! Go inside now! Get in the house!
And do you think there's any saving grace there at all? Like, do you believe that people might stand up to this insanity at some point?
Yes, I do. In fact, I'm working very hard for that. What I just said is what I'm afraid is going to happen. It doesn't have to happen that way. I think that the only hope, let's get through the point. What can we do? Well, as individuals, we can do very little. But as groups of people, and in very large groups of people, we can accomplish a lot. We may not be able to change the events because the power levers are in the hands of people of authority, as we were saying. I mean, they're in politics. They're at the head of at the other end of the lever. They've got hold of the switch. So things are going to happen whether we like it or not. But if we can mobilize tens of millions, if we can mobilize 1 billion people, and let the world and the people themselves see how many there are among themselves. I mean, most people think they're alone. They see the world through that television set, and it's always violence. The violent people, the burning, the breaking, the chanting, and it looks like that's the world. No, it's not the world. A little tiny piece, and it's theater. When the sun goes down and the camera crews are gone, these people get back in their buses or their vans and they go back to their hotel rooms and have a good night's sleep. So in the morning and they get on the bus and go home where they came from. You know, they're mercenaries. They're not the people of the United States. This is not a grassroots movement. This is organized by Mr. Soros and other people in the deep state. Huge amounts of money going in to fund all of that. This is not real. That's all they see. So they think that the world is gone. It's all that way, and it's not. So if we could mobilize enough people like they did in Berlin and in London last week or 2 weeks ago now, where you can see how many people there were. I mean, they go from horizon to horizon. That has got to have several beneficial results. First of all, it will give people the knowledge that they are not alone. It'll let them realize the truth, which is that, my gosh, not everybody is against us. It's just a lot of people, of course, are falling for the propaganda. But even among those, once they see how many there are out there in the street, peacefully showing up, just showing up. When this little girl in the grocery store that, you know, looks at you with a mean look, what's wrong with you? When she sees that there are a million people like you, she'll probably think, maybe I'm on the wrong side. So that will force her to rethink the truth of what she's been told. You know, we come out of school all the same way. We think that consensus is everything. So if the consensus is all that we have to wear masks, well, then that's got to be true. But if she can see that the consensus is something else, she, at that stage of enlightenment, will tend to be drawn by what she thinks is the consensus. This is why demonstrations are so important to our enemies, because they know that mentality, the group mentality, the mob mentality, is they go along with what everybody else goes along with. So that's the first advantage to do that. And then the second advantage, if you get people out of their basements and out of their lockdowns and they are rubbing elbows 1 million strong or 100,000 strong, some of those people are going to be exchanging telephone numbers, and they're going to have coffee the next day. They're going to make new friends. They're going to start forming coalitions. They're going to start forming into a coalition, a movement. They'll have political clout. They can then challenge the authority, mainly because of the masses of their number and the realization that they are still in the majority. Yeah. So that could change the scenario a lot, and that's what I'm counting on. We start, first of all, with reaching out to large numbers of people. This is not gonna make everything go away. I mean, the next few years are going to be tough. I mean, in a way, I think not only our country but the world is very much like a drug addict. Mm-hmm. We know we've got to get off the drug, but getting off of the drug, you know, is hard. There's going to be pain. There's going to be suffering, and if we try and do it in a certain way, it might even kill us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's going to be a lot of pain. The price has to be paid for what we've done in the past. But having said that, it can be done. And that's the beauty of it. There's a path. If we get off of our couches and get out there and meet with people in person, not on the computer, not emails, not cyberspace, but in person, eyeball to eyeball, handshake to handshake, we can do it.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, I have a sneaking suspicion that, like the Yuri interview you did, the Yuri Bezmenov interview you did in the 80s, people will be listening to the words that you're speaking now and 40 years from now. And either it's going to be on the good side or the bad side. And it's up to the people watching this right now in the year 2020 to make that decision. And, you know, we have some bits of hope here and there. We see, like, the Ron Paul revolution in 2007, just people forget that was unbelievable. I mean, I just watched the Ron Paul movie the other night just to refresh myself of what it was like, because I remember being one of those people as an activist for Ron Paul back then, and the idea was never to get him elected. It was just someone was saying something that people identified with and knew was common sense and reasonable, and within moments there were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets putting up signs and working day in, day out to get his message of individual liberty across to people. And I think that that can happen in this case, but with more passion behind it because of the dire times we live in. We have no choice at this point. And what's interesting is that the fishing rods are flying off the shelves right now at stores across the United States. Guns are flying off the shelves at countries across the United States. RVs are going like crazy. The demand is insane because people are leaving their homes, going into rural communities, the opposite of what Agenda 21 talked about, or Agenda 2030. So I think there is some hope there. But one last little negative thing before we get into that, because I think it's an interesting topic that we need to talk about today, Mr. Griffin, is they won't force vaccinate people. They just won't let us go anywhere, get jobs, fly, be a customer anywhere, or do anything without a vaccine tied to some sort of social credit score. You've been exposing Big Pharma, one of the world's biggest lobbies, for almost 60 years. How have they managed to gain so much power, and do you think they will succeed with some technocratic vaccine policy in the next year or two?
Well, yes, all of that is true. I've been involved in that battle against I have to laugh because I guess I picked my enemies pretty well. I've tackled the world banking institutions and the world pharmaceutical industry. So anything else left?
Well, I mean, and you can't find a bigger lobby in the world other than Big Pharma at this point in time.
And unless it's big military or something like that. Anyway, so back to the main point. Yeah, they have gained a tremendous amount of power. And again, the tactic is pretty much the same. It's fear of illness, fear of premature death, fear of infirmity. Everybody is sick. Well, that too is not necessarily an accident. It doesn't have to be that way. They're sick because of what they eat and their lifestyle and their medications. That's pretty much it. I mean, everybody dies eventually when they get old. Their parts just wear out. But even that can be extended, I think, if you pay attention to what you eat and avoid the toxic things that you like to put into your body because they taste good or they're fun or something like that. But so everybody wants to fight against their lifestyle and their ignorance. So they love the idea that you can go to the doctor and it's all paid for Medicare. So it doesn't make it. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, yep, you got condition X, Y, Z, and maybe L, And well, here we're going to give you this pill for this and two pills a day for this one. And this one, to be careful, maybe once or twice a week or as needed. And here's another, don't forget the blue one every morning as you get up. And don't forget, here's some salve to rub on your skin so it soaks into your skin. It's toxic as hell, but you got to work it into your system, The doctor loads you up with all this stuff that's basically toxic in the name of healing you or making you better in some way. But we find out that most of that stuff is not designed to heal, but to sustain the condition and keep you healthy enough so that you can live and work and earn enough money to buy the medication so you can continue to work and live and buy the medications and, that sort of thing. And that's the business model of the modern pharmaceutical industry. It's not to cure anything, but to sustain it and keep you alive so you can buy their products forevermore. So that's how they did it. It's a business model is what it is. It's a terribly unethical one. It kills me when they talk about their product as the ethical drugs.
Yeah, well, it's Orwellian doublespeak, isn't it? And it perfectly ties in with what you mentioned before. You tackle the financial system as well. I mean, if they tie it in with social credit scores, it all comes full circle. It's cashless society where you can't spend money unless you've been vaccinated.
Yeah, well, that was your point. Yeah, that is probably going to be the ultimate control. And I guess it was possible for some very clear-headed and clairvoyant people decades ago to see the arrival and growth of technology, or technocracy as they now call it. But even George Orwell didn't see that side of it very clearly. He saw it as a boot forever smashing into a human face, which certainly is the essence of it. But now we see the needle forever crashing into a person's arm to befuddle their brains and shorten their lifespan and make them ill, so they have to take other medications just to stay alive. Sometimes, I think if I had to choose, I'd probably take the boot. But it adds up to the same thing, which is the control over every human being on this planet.
Well, I hope to God that there is an escape from this in the future. I really do. And I think that I have some faith in humanity to stand up, but I think 50% of humanity is just going to go along with it just to save face. It's about comfort. It's not even about conformity. It's about comfort at the end of the day. They want to be comfortable in their slumber because standing up takes energy. Standing up means conflict. Standing up means, you know, they're the enemy, and they just, I think most people just want to be comfortable. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people falling for this very fast. I already see it at every radio station, whether right or left wing. I just hear, as the world waits for the vaccine for a virus. What? I mean, it's absurd. But with that said, we all know that. I think everyone watching this knows that. We're not allowed to talk about this on YouTube, by the way. So make sure to go to the alternatives and hit that like button on this video and share on social media. Let's get to something that's very uplifting, that's happening on October 10th and 11th on Jekyll Island in Georgia, of all places where the Federal Reserve was essentially founded. Mr. Griffin, please tell us about why you went through with this thing in the year 2020. It seems like the one thing that, like, most people have just canceled all their events. It just seems insane that you went along with it, and really commendable at the same time. Can you talk about the Red Pill Expo 2020?
Well, yes, I'm delighted to have that chance, because to me, the Red Pill Expo is the mechanism by which we have a chance at creating that kind of mass coalition I was talking about a moment ago. It doesn't just happen; it has to be organized. People have to have some place to go to recognize each other, or maybe a meeting, an address, a phone number, something. You know, even if it's a hash mark. So I didn't see that happening. Everybody's trying to do one, and I hope they all succeed, by the way. We could use more than one. But so anyway, I thought that the Red Pill University and the Red Pill Expo, which we already had in place, would really be ideal for that. And so I've been putting all my effort in developing the Red Pill Expo, which is like a public version of the university. University runs all year long. It's basically an internet group, but we're building also local campuses. We're trying to build it right now, campuses of the university in every county in the United States, and outside of the United States, other political subdivisions of comparable size. Because you do need people working together, as I said before, people getting together in small groups, starting with 6. That's the ideal number. 4 to 6 is an ideal power number to get something really moving in your local community, your you know, within a couple of miles driving distance. So, but then we needed a national funnel for that too. So that's the Red Pill Expo. We've had several of them, but this is the next one. And we had it scheduled for June on Jekyll Island. Well, most of your people know about Jekyll Island. That's the reason I put it in the title of my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, is because that's where the Federal Reserve System was concocted by these very powerful bankers back in 1910. They had that secret meeting there. And so Jekyll Island is kind of historic. It's also a beautiful resort island. Back in those days, it was owned by these bankers and their business associates from Wall Street, mostly, and some industrialists. It was a millionaires or a billionaires club. They owned the island. It was privately owned. Had this beautiful clubhouse there where we will be visiting as we go back there in a few weeks. And so we're returning to the scene of the crime, you might say, except it wasn't our crime, it was their crime. And we're doing our best to undo that crime. And anyway, so that's the historical background to Jekyll Island. It turns out to be very serendipitous, because I've been talking with the facility which intends to hold our event, and some of the local businesses there. And they love us. They can hardly wait to see our group come there. And most of the people on the island, I was surprised to find out, have read my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I can see why they might be interested, and they liked it. And they can hardly wait to see us come there and talk some more about it.
Well, imagine if you lived on the island. If you typed in the name of the island you live in, the first thing that's going to come up is your book. So I can only imagine it's almost impossible to avoid.
Yeah, right. So anyway, well, we find out that the governor of Georgia is more sane than most of the other governors. Mm-hmm. He said openly that he's not going to try and enforce any of these mandates, these distancing or masking mandates. And yes, the businesses that have anything to do with federal regulations, they feel compelled that they want to stay in business, that they have to put those signs up. You know, you may not enter without a mask. But I have found out from the people working and living there that nobody pays any attention. A few people might, but most people pay no attention to it. It's just a joke. And The police there have never tried to enforce it. They don't have any interest in that nonsense. So it's just serendipitous that that's where we're going. So emboldened by the fact that it wouldn't be hopefully it wouldn't be creating a lot of embarrassment and trouble for our people that are going there who weren't prepared for it. We decided, damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead. If we don't stand up now and start this pushback now, when are we going to do it? Next year when we're more weak? And if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And if not, if not there on Jekyll Island, where are we going to do it? So everything, it's time to do it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I thought about it, and I was getting all this good advice. Oh, yeah, it's too dangerous. Airlines might require all kinds of proof of negative tests and so forth. And I just got tired of listening to all of the things that could go wrong. We're in a war.
Yeah.
And you make your best shot. And I think the best shot is to take our stand and begin to push back and show the world that we are sane and we're not falling for this garbage, and we're showing up. So we did it. That's what we did.
You're right when you say this is a war. This is a war. People say the Civil War is going to happen. It's already happening. It's happening right now, and it's up to us to go to these kinds of events and spread this kind of information because flu season's coming up, and what's going to happen then? They're going to blame everything on COVID, and it's just going to continuously get worse if we don't continue to push forward and do these kinds of things. It's funny because government is only words on paper, ink on paper, until it's enforced by a strong arm. And you see a lot of these states, you see the signs on the door, you can't come in without a mask, but then you walk in without a mask and no one stops you. I've seen that. I was just in Georgia 2 months ago, didn't see any problem there. They had the sign on the door, and then I go into the restaurant and everyone, even in the kitchen, had no masks on. They're cooking the food. No one's wearing a mask except for one guy in the corner that's all scared. Probably shouldn't be going outside to begin with. And, I've seen the same thing in Arizona and other places. So, I mean, there is hope. I think it's all about enforcement versus compliance. But you have a lot of great speakers. You have people like, well, obviously yourself, but you also have people like David Icke, I saw on the list, which is very interesting to see. Cynthia McKinney, Alex Newman, of course, Del Bigtree, a lot of powerhouse voices that have really come alive, especially like have in the past, but really in this last year, in this time of desperation where we need to have those voices. And we see as people like David Icke is kicked off of YouTube. I know interviewing David Icke on this channel completely destroyed my channel, and it got me shadow banned completely, losing 95% of my audience. But because of that strong arm against what he's saying, more people are listening, and we saw that in the rallies in London recently, with some say over 100,000 people in the audience listening to the speeches. Same within Berlin and these other places. Really, it's time to move now. It's time to mobilize. It's time to put our words into actions, and it's enough talking, more action at this point. So I really appreciate all the amazing work that you've done. You've readied a lot of people, woken up a lot of people, and put us in a position over the last 60 years, Mr. Griffin, that allowed us to actually have some insight into this tyranny, enough to create a lot of skepticism, and that skepticism will save us in the long term. So I appreciate that. If you want to go to the Red Pill Expo 2020, the link is below the video. I hope you go there, and we will have the link all ready for you in the description and the comments. Anyway, final words, Mr. Griffin, where can people go to support the work that you do?
Well, I think the best place to start is to go, as you just said, to the Red Pill Expo and check that out. Now, we know that most people can't make the trip, depending on where they live. I mean, it's a long trip, and it costs some money, and a lot of people are having economic troubles right now. Mm-hmm. So we know that only maybe 5-10% of everybody can go. So that's why we have the live stream plan too. So don't think that you shouldn't go there because you shouldn't go to the website because you can't go to Georgia. No, there's a web a live stream available too, which is going to deliver everything. So that you can start there, and then really, if you want to become active and make a difference and be part of the change, as you say. Then go to redpilluniversity.org. That's really where the action begins there. And yes, I think we already have the world's largest repository of information on topics like we've been discussing here today. And it's all free. We tackled with that idea in the beginning. We said, well, this is going to be an expensive operation. We have to charge for it. And then the idea, well, yeah, but if we charge for it, people say you're just in it for the money. Besides, we have to have money to make it run.
Of course.
Back and forth, back and forth. And finally, I decided, okay, here, another one of these things. Damn the torpedoes. Let's make a decision and go for it. Everything is free. And so we hope, I don't care whether you can afford it or what you think of it, like it, dislike it, come and look at it. Now, for those, the remnants, that say, gee, this is great, and I want to help out, I want to make this available to the world at no charge, then those are the people that can come on and support us and become patrons of the university. But I say that because I want everybody to know that everything we have on this site is at no charge whatsoever. And we're putting together, I think, the best collection of information like this anywhere in the world. And from there, you can decide if you want to support the university, and then you can take the next step up into Freedom Force International, which is kind of the hardcore group behind it. Like people like you and people like me, we live and breathe this 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. This is our lives. This is our passion. And there are people out there like that, and we need them. They're the ones that'll make the organizational work. It's all a volunteer group. Nobody gets paid anything. But they're the ones that make it work. So there's that path, and it's an option. You'll find it all there at redpilluniversity.org.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. And the links are below, my friends. Make sure to go there and support. Really appreciate it, Mr. Griffin, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Josh, and good luck to you. And I'll see you on Jekyll Island.